Lieutenant Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the landing shuttle. The air on Kepler 442c felt thick and strange in his lungs. A planet looked empty and dead from orbit, but now that he was standing on its surface, he could feel something different. Something old was waiting here. "This place gives me the creeps," said Tony Garcia, the team's communications expert. He was setting up his equipment near the shuttle, but his eyes kept looking at the dark mountains in the distance. "Stop being such a baby," laughed Jake. "It's just rocks and dust. What's the worst that could happen?" Dr. Lisa Hayes rolled her eyes as she checked her archaeological scanner. "Famous last words, Jake. And please try to remember this is a scientific mission, not a vacation." Lisa was the smartest person Jake had ever met. She could read alien languages that had been dead for thousands of years and figure out how ancient machines worked just by looking at them. She was also pretty, which made Jake nervous around her sometimes. Not that he would ever admit that to anyone. Commander Amy Foster finished securing the landing area and walked over to join them. Amy was tough as nails and could probably beat up 3 men at once, but she was also fair and looked out for her team. Jake respected her more than any officer he had ever served under. "The area is secure," Amy reported, "but I'm picking up some strange energy readings about 2 kilometers north. They're coming from underground." Lisa's scanner started beeping excitedly. "I'm getting the same readings. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's definitely artificial, but the technology appears to be incredibly ancient." Jake grinned. "Ancient alien technology? This is starting to sound like fun." "This is not a game, Jake," Lisa said sternly. "If we're dealing with unknown alien tech, we need to be extremely careful. One wrong move could trigger defensive systems or contaminate the site." The team packed their gear and started walking toward the energy source. The landscape was mostly flat and covered with strange purple rocks that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the system's red sun. Jake had been on dozens of alien worlds, but this one felt different. It felt like something was watching them. After an hour of walking, they found what they were looking for. A large crack in the ground led down into darkness. Amy dropped a light stick into the opening and watched it fall. The light kept falling for a long time before it finally hit bottom. "It's deep," Amy said. "Maybe 50 meters down. But there's definitely something artificial down there. The walls look carved, not natural." They set up rappelling gear and started their descent into the crack. As they went deeper, the walls around them began to change. The rough stone became smooth and polished. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing with the same faint light as the purple rocks above. "These symbols are incredible," Lisa whispered as she ran her fingers over the carved markings. "They're not like anything in the Xenolinguistics database. This civilization must be much older than anything we've discovered before." At the bottom of the crack, they found themselves in a vast underground chamber. Their lights could not reach the far walls or the ceiling. The air was warm and humid, and it smelled like flowers and something else Jake could not identify. "Look at this," Tony called out. His voice echoed strangely in the huge space. "There's some kind of temple or something over here." They followed Tony's voice and found him standing at the entrance, an enormous structure carved directly into the chamber wall. Tall pillars supported a roof covered with more of the glowing symbols. Inside, they could see dozens of statues arranged in neat rows. "This is the archaeological find of the century," Lisa breathed. "Maybe the millennium. This temple could be tens of thousands of years old." Jake walked into the temple first, despite Amy's protests about security protocols. The statues were incredible. They were all carved from the same glowing stone as the wall symbols, and they depicted tall, graceful beings with long arms and legs. The faces were almost human, but more refined, more perfect somehow. "They're beautiful," Jake said softly. Look at the detail work. You can see every finger, every fold of their clothing. It's like they were real people who just got turned to stone. Each statue was unique, showing different poses and expressions. Some looked sad, others looked wise, and a few seemed to be smiling. They were arranged around a central platform where one statue stood alone. This central statue was different from the others. It was much larger, standing at least 12 feet tall. While the other statues seemed to be ordinary people, this one was clearly some kind of leader or god. It wore elaborate robes and a crown, and its face had an expression of deep wisdom and infinite sadness. This must be their king or high priest or something, Jake said as he walked around the statue. Look at the craftsmanship on this thing. It's perfect. Lisa was busy taking pictures and scanning the symbols carved into the base of the statue. These inscriptions are fascinating. I think they might be some kind of warning or prophecy. If I'm reading this correctly, it talks about guardians and sleeping watchers. Sleeping watchers? Jake asked. You mean like these statues are supposed to be watching over something? Maybe, Lisa said. But my translation software is having trouble with some of these symbols. They're using concepts that don't exist in any human language. Jake continued walking around the big statue, studying its face. There was something almost human about its features. The lips especially looked remarkably lifelike. In fact, the whole statue looked so real that Jake almost expected it to start breathing. Hey, Lisa, Jake called out with a mischievous grin. You said this thing might be some kind of god, right? Maybe I should pay my respects. Jake, don't even think about it, Lisa warned. But she was too busy with her translations to really pay attention to what he was doing. Jake looked up at the statue's face. The expression was so lifelike, so sad and wise, almost like it was looking down at him with pity. The lips were curved in just the slightest suggestion of a smile. You know what? Jake said to Tony and Amy, who were exploring other parts of the temple. I bet this guy hasn't gotten any action in 1,000 years. Maybe I should help him out. Jake Morrison, don't you dare, Lisa said sharply, finally looking up from her work. This is an irreplaceable archaeological artifact. If you contaminate it with your DNA, you could ruin years of research. But Jake was already climbing up onto the platform. He was known for his practical jokes and his refusal to take anything too seriously. It was part of what made him a good soldier, but also what drove his commanding officers crazy. Come on, Lisa. It's just a statue. What's the worst that could happen? Jake said as he reached up toward the statue's face. Besides, look at those lips. They're practically asking for it. Before anyone could stop him, Jake pressed his lips against the cold stone mouth of the ancient statue. It was meant to be a joke, something to make his teammates laugh and break the serious mood that had serious mood in the ancient place. The moment his lips touched the stone, everything changed. The statue's eyes snapped open, glowing with a brilliant blue light that filled the entire temple. Jake tried to pull away, but he found he could not move. The stone lips under his had become warm and soft, and a voice spoke directly into his mind. Foolish child of a young race, the voice said, filled with ancient sadness and terrible knowledge. You have awakened the guardian of the threshold. Your species has doomed itself through this act of innocent hubris. Jake finally managed to stumble backward, his heart pounding. The statue was no longer stone. It was alive, looking down at him with eyes that held the weight of centuries. When it spoke again, its voice filled the temple and echoed in their minds. The seal is broken. The sleepers wake. Your earth has 72 of your hours before. The hunger finds it. I am sorry, small one. I am truly sorry. The temple fell silent, except for the sound of 4 humans breathing heavily. Jake stared up at the guardian, whose glowing blue eyes never left his face. The other statues around the temple began to glow faintly, as if the awakening of their leader had stirred something in them too. "What did you do?" Amy whispered, her hand moving to her weapon, even though she knew it would be useless against something like this. "I didn't mean to," Jake said, his voice shaking. "It was just supposed to be a joke. How was I supposed to know it was actually alive?" The Guardian stepped down from its platform with movements that were graceful despite its massive size. Each footstep echoed through the temple like thunder. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "My name is Zaraketh, last guardian of the Etherian people. For 1,000 of your Earth years, I had stood watch over this prison. And now, through your innocent touch, the lock has been broken." Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "Prison? What kind of prison? And what are you guarding?" Zaraketh looked at her with those ancient, sad eyes. "You are brave, young scholar. I will tell you the truth, though it will bring you no comfort. This temple is not a monument to my people. It is a cage built to contain the Devourers." "Devourers?" Tony asked, his communication equipment forgotten as he stared at the towering alien. "They are hunger given form," Zaraketh explained. "They consume not just flesh and blood, but the very essence of life itself. They feed on memories, dreams, hopes, and knowledge. When they are done with the world, nothing remains but empty shells and silent stone." The Guardian walked to one of the temple walls and placed its hand on the glowing symbols. Suddenly, the symbols began to move and change, showing pictures instead of words. Jake and his team watched in horror as the story unfolded. Before them, the pictures showed beautiful worlds full of life and civilization. Then came the Devourers, creatures of shadow and hunger that swept across planets like a plague. Everywhere they went, the lights of cities went out forever. Billions of beings were reduced to empty husks in a matter of days. "My people, the Etherians, were once the greatest civilization in this part of the galaxy," Zaraketh continued. "We had colonies on 1,000 worlds and knowledge that spanned the stars. But when the Devourers came, all of our power meant nothing." The pictures showed desperate battles as the Etherians fought against the shadow creatures. Their weapons passed right through the Devourers like they were shooting at ghosts. Ships, soldiers, entire planets fell one by one. "We could not kill them because they were not truly alive in the way you understand life," Zaraketh said. "They existed between dimensions, feeding on the life force of our reality while remaining safely beyond our reach." Amy frowned as she studied the moving pictures. "But you stopped them somehow. This prison you mentioned." "Yes," Zaraketh nodded sadly. "Our greatest minds discovered a way to trap them between dimensions, but the cost was terrible. The ritual required the willing sacrifice of an entire world's population to power the dimensional locks." Jake felt sick to his stomach. "Your people killed themselves to stop these things?" "Not killed," Zaraketh corrected. "Transformed. We bound our life essence into this prison, becoming the walls that keep the Devourers contained. Every statue in this temple contains the soul of an Etherian who chose eternal watchfulness over extinction." Lisa was frantically taking notes and pictures. "But the prison worked. You stopped them." "For a time," Zaraketh said. "But the lock was designed with a fatal flaw. We knew that someday someone would find this place. The prison could only be opened by the willing touch of an innocent being from a species that had never encountered the Devourers before." Jake's heart sank as he understood. "My kiss, that was the key. Your people call it a kiss, but in the old tongue, it was known as the touch of the innocent. It had to be given freely, without knowledge of its true purpose. Only such a touch could unlock the dimensional barriers." Tony was working on his communication equipment, trying to boost the signal strength. Why would you build in a way for? The prison to be opened? That's insane. Zaraketh looked at him with something that might have been approval. Because we knew that eternal imprisonment was not justice, even for creatures like the Devourers. They too were once a natural part of the universe, before their hunger consumed their souls. We hoped that someday a species might arise that could find a better solution than our cage. But we're just humans, Jake protested. We barely figured out how to travel between stars. How are we supposed to solve a problem that your super-advanced civilization couldn't handle? Perhaps you cannot, Zaraketh admitted. But the choice is no longer mine to make. The seal weakens with each passing moment. Already, I can feel the Devourers stirring in their prison. They taste freedom in the air. Lisa looked up from her scanner, her face pale. The energy readings are changing. Whatever was keeping them contained is breaking down fast. How long do we have? Amy asked, always thinking like a soldier. 72 of your hours, Zaraketh said. When the barriers fail completely, the Devourers will be free to resume their ancient hunt. And they will follow the psychic trail left by your young friend here, straight back to your homeworld. Jake felt the weight of billions of lives settling on his shoulders. There has to be something we can do. Some way to fix this. Zaraketh was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake's face with those glowing eyes. There may be one path, but it is not a path any sane being would choose. Tell. U.S., Lisa demanded. The original prison ritual required willing sacrifice from my people. A similar ritual could restore the barriers, but it would require the life force of an entire inhabited world to power it. Amy stepped forward angrily. So you're saying we have to sacrifice Earth to save the galaxy? That's not a solution. That's just trading one tragedy for another. There is another way, Zaraketh said slowly, but it has never been attempted. The ancient texts speak of a possibility for synthesis rather than imprisonment. What kind of synthesis? Jake asked. Instead of caging the Devourers, it might be possible to merge with them, to combine their hunger with the compassion and creativity of a younger species. But such a merging would change both species forever. You would no longer be entirely human, and they would no longer be pure hunger. Tony finally managed to boost his communication signal. I'm getting through to the orbital relay. Sending emergency message to Earth now. Lisa was studying the moving pictures on the wall, trying to understand the ancient Etherian technology. These symbols here, they're not part of the original prison design. They look newer. Zaraketh nodded. My people left instructions for both paths. The ritual of renewed imprisonment and the theoretical process for synthesis. We hoped that whoever found this place would be wise enough to choose correctly. But which choice is correct? Jake asked. That is not for me to decide, Zaraketh replied. I have been a guardian for 1,000 years, but I was never meant to be a judge. The choice belongs to your species now. Amy was studying the tactical situation. Even if we decide what to do, how do we get word back to Earth in time? And how do we convince anyone that this is real? Your communication device will carry my words as well as yours, Zaraketh said. I will speak to your leaders and tell them what they face. Whether they believe me or not is beyond my control. Jake felt a strange tingling in his mind, like something was trying to get in. What's happening to me? The touch of the innocent created a bond between you and the failing prison, Zaraketh explained. As the barriers weaken, you will begin to sense what lies beyond them. Consider it both a gift and a curse. Suddenly, Jake's vision filled with darkness and hunger. He could feel something vast and terrible stirring in the space between dimensions. Sensing the weakness in its cage, the Devourers were waking up, and they were very, very hungry. They know we're here, Jake gasped. They can feel me just like I can feel them. Zaraketh nodded grimly. Then time grows shorter than I hoped. The awakening has begun. Admiral Kevin Drake was having his morning coffee when the emergency message came through. He had been expecting reports from routine survey missions, not desperate transmissions about ancient alien prisoners and the end of humanity. But after 30 years in Earth Defense Command, he had learned to take even the strangest reports seriously. "Play it again," he ordered his communications officer. Tony Garcia's voice filled the command center, full of fear and urgency. "Earth Defense Command, this is Survey Team 7 on Kepler 442c. We have discovered an ancient alien prison containing hostile entities called Devourers. The prison has been compromised. Repeat, the prison has been compromised. We need immediate evacuation and full fleet response." Then came a different voice, deeper and strangely musical. It spoke directly into their minds rather than through their ears. "People of Earth, I'm Zaraketh, guardian of the Etherian people. Your species faces extinction in 71 hours. The creatures we imprisoned have tasted freedom and will follow the psychic trail to your homeworld. I am sorry." Admiral Drake set down his coffee cup with a steady hand, but his mind was racing. "Get me President Collins on secure line. And contact Dr. Peter Chun at the Science Institute and Dr. Rachel Green at the Xenobiology Center. If this is real, we're going to need our best minds working on it." Within an hour, Earth's most important leaders were gathered in the deep underground command center beneath Washington. President Sarah Collins looked tired but determined as she listened to the recorded message for the third time. "Admiral, what's your assessment?" she asked. "The energy readings from Kepler 442c confirm massive power signatures consistent with the team's report." Drake replied, "Whatever's happening out there, it's real and it's big." Dr. Peter Chun, Earth's leading expert on theoretical physics, was studying the data streaming in from the survey team. "The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. This technology operates on principles we barely understand." Dr. Rachel Green looked up from her genetic scanner, her face pale. "There's something else. I've been analyzing the biological data in Lieutenant Morrison's medical records. His DNA is showing some very unusual markers." President Collins frowned. "What kind of markers?" "I'm not sure yet, but they appeared right after his contact with the alien statue. It's like something in his genetic code has been activated." Meanwhile, on Kepler 442c, Jake was getting worse. The visions were coming more frequently now, showing him glimpses of the space between dimensions where the Devourers waited. He could feel their hunger growing stronger as the prison barriers continued to weaken. "They're not just hungry for food," he told Lisa as she helped him sit down. "They want everything. Memories, emotions, dreams. They want to experience what it feels like to be alive by consuming other living things." Lisa was working frantically to translate more of the Etherian texts. "I think I'm starting to understand how their technology works. It's not just science. It's a combination of advanced physics and something like magic." "Magic doesn't exist," Amy said firmly, though her voice carried doubt. "Maybe not the way we understand it," Lisa replied. "But the Etherians found ways to use consciousness itself as a tool. Their prison doesn't just contain the Devourers physically. It contains them mentally and spiritually, too." Back on Earth, Dr. Chun was working with teams of physicists around the clock. The Etherian data was revolutionary, showing technologies that could manipulate space and time itself. But understanding it and actually using it were two very different things. "The neural network idea might work," he told Admiral Drake during a briefing. "If we could connect every human consciousness on Earth through quantum entanglement, we might be able to generate enough psychic energy to reinforce the prison barriers." "How would that even work?" Drake asked. "Think of it like a computer network, but instead of machines, we're linking human minds. Every person on Earth would need to focus their thoughts in perfect harmony. The combined willpower of 8 billion people might be enough to strengthen the dimensional locks. Dr. Green joined the conversation, carrying a tablet full of genetic data. I've made a breakthrough. Jake Morrison's DNA changes aren't random. They match genetic markers I've found in ancient human fossils. What are you saying? President Collins asked. I'm saying that humans might not be as alien to this situation as we thought. These genetic markers suggest that somewhere in our distant past, humans had contact with the Etherian species. The implications hit everyone at once. If humans were somehow connected to the Etherians, it might explain why Jake's touch could open the prison. It might also mean they had options that Zaraketh hadn't mentioned. There's more, Dr. Green continued. I've been studying the Etherian genetic samples from the temple. Their DNA shows signs of artificial modification. They weren't naturally evolved to bind their life force into dimensional locks. They changed themselves to fight the Devourers. Admiral Drake was already thinking like a military strategist. So, if they could modify themselves to become Guardians, maybe we could modify ourselves to become something that could actually fight these things. Or absorb them, Dr. Green said quietly. The synthesis option the Guardian mentioned might be more literal than we thought. If humans have Etherian ancestry, we might be able to complete a merger that the original Etherians never attempted. President Collins stood up and walked to the wall display showing Earth from space. 8 billion people going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species might end in less than 70 hours. What are the risks of the neural network plan? She asked. Dr. Chun sighed. Massive. We're talking about linking every human mind on the planet. The neural overload could kill millions of people. And even if it works, we don't know what the long-term effects would be. And the synthesis option? Even riskier, Dr. Green admitted. We'd be permanently changing what it means to be human. There's no going back from something like that. Meanwhile, Captain Maria Santos was preparing the Earth fleet for departure. The Hartford and 12 other ships were being loaded with every weapon and piece of scientific equipment they could carry. She knew the journey to Kepler 442c would take 40 hours at maximum speed, leaving very little time for action once they arrived. Captain, her science officer reported, we're receiving more data from the survey team. The energy readings from the planet are increasing exponentially. How long until the prison fails completely? She asked. Based on current decay rates, approximately 31 hours from now. Back in the temple, Jake was barely conscious. The psychic connection to the failing prison was overwhelming his human mind. He could see fragments of the Devourer's memories. Now, glimpses of the countless worlds they had consumed over millions of years. They're not evil, he whispered to Lisa. They're just hungry. They don't understand that the things they consume are alive and feel pain. To them, we're just food that makes interesting noises. Zaraketh knelt beside Jake, placing one massive hand gently on his forehead. The bond grows stronger. Soon you'll be able to communicate with them directly. Can I reason with them? Jake asked. The Etherians tried that once, Zaraketh replied sadly. But how do you explain the concept of mercy to creatures that have never experienced anything but endless hunger? Amy was checking her weapons for the 100th time, though she knew bullets would be useless against beings made of pure energy. There has to be a way to fight them. Perhaps, Zaraketh said, your species has something the Etherians never possessed. What's that? Lisa asked. Hope, the Guardian replied. My people faced the Devourers with resignation and duty. But humans face impossible odds with stubborn optimism. That difference might matter more than you know. On Earth, the final preparations were being made. Dr. Chun's neural network equipment was being installed in every major city. Dr. Green's genetic modification treatments were being prepared for anyone who volunteered. And President Collins was writing what might be humanity's last message to the universe. But in a small research lab in Geneva, a young scientist named Ben Clark was studying the Etherian data from a different angle. He had noticed something that everyone else had missed, something that might change everything they thought they knew about the Devourers and their prison. The countdown continued. 29 hours until the barriers failed completely. 29 hours to save humanity, or watch it become food for ancient horrors that had devoured civilizations since before Earth's sun was born. Captain Maria Santos watched Kepler 442c grow larger on her ship's main screen. The Hartford and her fleet had pushed their engines to the breaking point to get here in time. According to their instruments, they had less than 8 hours before. The ancient prison failed completely. Captain, we're detecting massive energy discharges from the planet's surface, her science officer reported. Whatever's down there is fighting to get out. Any word from the survey team? She asked. Intermittent signals only. The energy field around the temple is interfering with communications. Santos studied the tactical display. Her fleet carried humanity's most advanced weapons, but she knew conventional warfare would be useless against creatures that existed between dimensions. Still, she had to try something. All ships, prepare for planetary assault. Target any energy sources that appear hostile. We may not be able to kill these things, but maybe we can slow them down. Down in the temple, Jake was barely hanging on. The psychic connection to the Devourers was tearing his mind apart, but it was also teaching him things about their true nature that no one else understood. They're afraid, he gasped to Lisa, who was trying to keep him conscious. The Devourers are afraid of dying. How can things made of pure hunger be afraid? Amy asked. Because they remember what it was like before, Jake explained through gritted teeth. They used to be a normal species, like us. But something happened to them millions of years ago. Something that turned their need to survive into an endless craving that could never be satisfied. Zaraketh looked down at Jake with something like surprise. In 1,000 years of guarding this prison, I never sensed their fear. How can you perceive what we could not? Maybe because I'm still partly human, Jake said. The Etherians were too advanced, too far removed from basic survival instincts. But humans still remember what it's like to be hungry, to be desperate, to make terrible choices just to stay alive. Lisa was frantically working on her translation of the ancient texts. Jake's right. Look at these passages I missed before. The Devourers weren't always monsters. They were called the Kethra, and they were explorers and scientists. What changed them? Tony asked. Their home star was dying, Lisa read from the glowing symbols. They tried to save their people by transferring their consciousness into energy. Beings, but the process went wrong. Instead of preserving their minds, it turned them into creatures of pure need. Jake suddenly convulsed as another wave of alien memories hit him. He saw the Kethra as they once were, peaceful beings who loved art and music and learning. He saw their desperate attempts to save their civilization as their sun began to collapse. And he saw the moment when their greatest scientific achievement became their eternal curse. They didn't choose to become monsters, he whispered. They were trying to survive, just like we are now. Above the planet, Captain Santos was coordinating the fleet's attack on the energy sources scattered across the temple complex. Their plasma, cannons and quantum torpedoes were having some effect, but not enough to stop the prison from continuing to weaken. Captain, we're getting a priority transmission from Earth, her communications officer announced. President Collins appeared on a main screen, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Captain Santos, Dr. Chun believes he has a solution, but it requires perfect timing and incredible risk. What kind of solution, ma'am? We're going to attempt the neural network linkage with every human on Earth at the moment the prison fails. If we can focus our combined consciousness at exactly the right moment, We might be able to merge with the Devourers instead of being consumed by them. Santos felt her blood run cold. You're talking about changing the entire human species? Yes, Collins admitted. Dr. Green's research shows that we have the genetic compatibility to survive the merger, but we don't know what will become afterward. The alternative is extinction. In the temple, Zaraketh was listening to the transmission through Tony's communication equipment. The ancient guardian turned to Jake with something that might have been hope in those glowing eyes. Your leaders are braver than mine were, Zaraketh said. The Etherians chose imprisonment over transformation because we feared losing our identity. But perhaps identity is a small price to pay for survival. It's not just about survival, Jake said, struggling to sit up. It's about giving the Devourers a chance to become something better than what they are now. They've been trapped in hunger for so long, they've forgotten what it means to create instead of consume. Amy was checking the structural integrity of the temple as energy discharges from the failing prison grew stronger. This whole place is starting to come apart. How long do we have? 6 hours, Zaraketh replied. Maybe less. Lisa made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest part of the ancient text was a passage that had been sealed until now. There's another option, she announced. The Etherians left instructions for something they called the Great Joining. What's that? Jake asked. Instead of one species absorbing the other, it's a true merger. Human creativity and compassion combined with Devourer energy and knowledge. But it requires a willing representative from both sides to initiate the process. Jake understood immediately. The representative has to be someone who's already connected to both species. You, Zaraketh said simply. The touch of the innocent created a bridge between human and Devourer consciousness. You are already partially transformed. But if I complete the merger, what happens to me? You become something new, the Guardian replied. Neither fully human nor fully Devourer, but a combination of both. You would be the first of a new kind of being. Amy stepped forward angrily. You're not seriously considering this, Jake. We don't even know if it will work. What choice do we have? Jake asked. If I don't try, everyone on Earth dies. If I do try and it fails, everyone on Earth still dies. But if it works, humanity and the Devourers both get a chance at a better future. Captain Santos coordinated, with Earth as the final preparations were made. The neural network was activated, linking 8 billion human minds in a delicate web of consciousness. The genetic modification treatments were distributed to volunteers who would help anchor the connection. All stations report ready, Dr. Chun announced from Earth. We have one shot at this. If the timing is off by even a few seconds, the neural overload could kill billions of people. In the temple, the prison barriers were flickering like a dying light. Through the cracks in reality, Jake could see the Devourers stirring in their dimensional cage. They sensed freedom coming, and there, ancient hunger was building to a fever pitch. They're so tired, Jake said sadly. Millions of years of endless craving with no hope of satisfaction. They want it to end almost as much as we want to survive. Zaraketh placed both hands on Jake's shoulders. Are you certain about this path, young human? Once begun, the Great Joining cannot be stopped or reversed. Jake looked at his teammates, these people who had become like family to him during their years of exploring the galaxy together. Lisa with her brilliant mind and endless curiosity. Amy with her fierce loyalty and protective instincts. Tony with his steady reliability and quiet humor. Take care of each other, he told them. And remember that sometimes the greatest victories come from refusing to see your enemies as monsters. The prison barriers gave one final flicker and began to collapse completely. Through the widening cracks, the Devourers reached out with tendrils of pure hunger, tasting freedom for the first time in 1,000 years. Jake walked to the center of the temple and opened his mind to both the human neural network and the alien consciousness pressing against the failing prison walls. The great joining began, and reality itself held its breath to see what would emerge from the merger of Alf. Two very different kinds of desperate hope. Jake felt the moment when the prison barriers finally collapsed completely. The sensation was like standing in the middle of an earthquake while lightning struck all around him. But instead of running away, he opened his arms and welcomed both. The human consciousness flowing through the neural network and the alien hunger pouring out of its dimensional cage. The first touch of devourer consciousness nearly destroyed his mind. It was hunger beyond anything humans could imagine, a craving, so deep and desperate that it had consumed entire galaxies. But underneath that endless need, Jake sensed something else: loneliness, regret, and a tiny spark of hope that had somehow survived millions of years of darkness. "I know what you are," Jake said, speaking both aloud and directly into the alien, minds pressing against his own. "You're not monsters. You're survivors who forgot how to live." The devourers recoiled at first, startled by the strange sensation of being understood rather than feared. For so long, every species they encountered had seen them only as death incarnate. But this small human creature was offering something they had not experienced since their transformation began. Compassion through the neural network. Jake felt 8 billion human minds joining with his own. Each person on Earth was adding their strength to the connection, sharing their memories, dreams, and determination. He felt President Collins' steady resolve, Dr. Chan's brilliant curiosity, Dr. Green's passionate dedication to preserving life in all its forms. But more than that, he felt ordinary people choosing to trust him with their future. Children in school playgrounds, parents working late to support their families, elderly couples holding hands in quiet gardens. All of them were offering their consciousness to save a species they had never met and to forgive creatures that wanted to devour them. "This is what humans do," Jake told the devourers as their alien thoughts merged with his own. "We choose hope over fear, even when fear makes more sense." The transformation began slowly, like two different colors of paint mixing together. Jake's human memories and emotions flowed into the devourer consciousness, showing them what they had lost when they became creatures of pure hunger. The sensation of eating food for pleasure instead of desperate need. The joy of creating art that served no survival purpose. The warm feeling of friendship and love. In return, the devourer memories flowed into Jake's mind. He experienced the vast knowledge they had absorbed from countless civilizations over millions of years. Scientific discoveries, artistic achievements, philosophical insights from 1,000 different species. All of it had been preserved within their hunger, waiting for someone who could appreciate it instead of simply consuming it. "You remember everything," Jake whispered in amazement. "Every world you consumed, every life you took. You've been carrying the memories of entire civilizations inside you." The guilt and sorrow that came with those memories nearly overwhelmed him. The devourers had not simply destroyed countless worlds. They had been forced to experience the death of every being they consumed. They felt every moment of fear, every flash of pain, every final thought of the billions they had devoured. The knowledge had been driving them insane for eons. But now, with human consciousness mixed into their being, they could process those memories differently. Instead of experiencing only the death, they could also remember the lives that came before. The love, joy, hope, and dreams of all those extinct civilizations were still there, preserved in perfect detail. "We can bring them back," Jake realized. "Not as they were, but as part of what we become." The great joining accelerated, spreading out from the temple in waves that crossed space faster than light itself. Every human on Earth felt the change. As it swept through them, they remained themselves, but they were also more than themselves. Their minds expanded to encompass knowledge and perspectives they had never imagined. Dr. Chun suddenly understood scientific principles that his civilization would not have discovered for another 1,000 years. Dr. Green found herself able to perceive the genetic patterns of life itself, seeing how consciousness could be preserved and transferred between different forms of existence. President Collins felt the weight of responsibility for not just humanity, but for all the species that the Devourers had preserved within their collective memory. Captain Santos and her fleet watched in awe as the energy discharges from the planet suddenly changed. Instead of chaotic destruction, they became patterns of incredible beauty. The light from the temple reached out across space like gentle hands, touching each ship and every person aboard. "What's happening to us?" her science officer asked in wonder. "We're becoming something new," Santos replied, and somehow she knew it was true. In the temple, Lisa, Amy, and Tony watched their friend complete his transformation. Jake's body was changing, becoming taller and more graceful, with skin that glowed faintly with inner light. But his eyes were still recognizably human, still filled with the humor and determination they had always known. "How do you feel?" Lisa asked carefully. Jake smiled, and his voice carried harmonics that spoke to both human ears and alien consciousness. "I feel complete. For the first time in my life, I understand what I was meant to become." He turned to Zaraketh, who was staring at him with amazement. "Your vigil is over, Guardian. The prison is empty, but not because the Devourers escaped. They chose transformation over eternal hunger." Zaraketh slowly began to change as well. The stone-like appearance fell away, revealing the graceful Etherean form beneath. But like Jake, the Guardian was becoming something new, a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the Etherians and the fresh possibilities of this merger. "My people believed that sacrifice was the only way to stop the Devourers," Zaraketh said. "But your species has shown us that redemption is possible, even for the most lost souls." The transformation spread beyond Earth, reaching every human colony and outpost across known space. Terraforming crews on distant worlds suddenly found themselves able to communicate directly with the planets they were trying to reshape, understanding how to work with natural systems instead of against them. Space explorers discovered they could sense the presence of life across vast distances, feeling the unique signatures of consciousness wherever it existed. The lonely, dangerous work of expanding into the galaxy became a joyful exploration of connection and discovery. But the greatest change came in humanity's relationship with other species. The preserved memories and knowledge of 1,000 extinct civilizations flowed through human consciousness, teaching them about forms of life they had never imagined. More importantly, they learned from the mistakes that had led to those civilizations' destruction. Jake, now serving as the primary bridge between human and devourer consciousness, established the first interstellar guidance collective. It would not be a government or military force, but something more like a wise friend who could offer advice and assistance to developing civilizations. "We won't interfere unless we're asked," Jake explained to the first meeting of the collective. "And we'll never impose our solutions on others. But we can share the wisdom of all the species that came before, helping young civilizations avoid the mistakes that led to their predecessors' destruction." Lisa, who had become one of the primary researchers studying the merged consciousness, made an important discovery. "The transformation isn't just permanent," she announced. "It's evolving. Each generation of humans born after the Great Joining will be more adapted to this new form of existence." Amy, now serving as the security coordinator for the collective, was training the first generation of guidance peacekeepers. They would be protectors and helpers, not conquerors, skilled in resolving conflicts through understanding rather than force. Tony had become the chief communications officer for humanity's expanded civilization. His job was to listen for the first radio signals from developing worlds, The moment when young species took their first steps toward joining the galactic community. Years passed, and humanity's children grew up knowing that they were part of something larger than one species, or one world. They played games that taught them to think like beings from other dimensions. They learned languages that had been spoken on worlds that died before Earth's sun was born. They dreamed dreams that carried the hopes of civilizations across the entire history of the galaxy. Jake, no longer quite human, but still recognizably himself, stood in the gardens of New Geneva and watched children of a dozen different species playing together. Some were human, some were the transformed descendants of other civilizations that had been preserved in devourer memory and given new life. And some were young beings from species that humanity had encountered and befriended during their explorations. Any regrets? Lisa asked, joining him in the garden. She too had been changed by the merger, though she had chosen to retain a mostly human appearance. Jake grinned, and his smile held all the mischief and humor that had once led him to kiss an ancient statue on a dare. Are you kidding? I got to save the galaxy and become a cosmic guardian. Every human boy's dream come true, even if it meant giving up being entirely human. I didn't give up being human, Jake replied. I just became human plus. We all did. And now we get to help other species become the best versions of themselves, too.